Alrighty, hello everyone, and hello Kate especially. Welcome back to the Students on Success podcast, where today we have Kate Austin, who's the Academic Accessibility Specialist here at LaSalle University. So welcome, Kate. We're so excited to have you today.
Thank you,
And
Jess. Appreciate that.
of course. And so my first question is, well, the statement is welcome to LaSalle. So when did you join us?
Actually, February 14th.
Okay,
So just about 6 weeks now. Yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
excellent. So
No.
welcome to LaSalle. Could you please
Thank you.
tell us about your journey to becoming, well, your journey to coming to LaSalle and then to becoming our academic accessibility specialist here?
Yes. Well, I have to just preface this by saying that I have lived in the world of learning disabilities of various different kinds throughout. I mean, grew up with them in my family, had two of my three children have learning disabilities. So I am very like living the dream. I know what it feels like to be the parent of and what it looks like at home. But as a career, I worked for 27 years in the public school system in New Jersey, case managing students with disabilities. So I wrote IEPs, I did evaluations to determine eligibility. But in that process, I took on a lot of different roles. So I sort of took on a teaching role where I worked in a trauma-informed classroom and we taught executive functioning skills and emotional regulation skills. So it started out as sort of a case management role, but it became a lot of group counseling. It became a lot of individual counseling, and it became this whole classroom arrangement that was really such a wonderful experience. And as my children, now I transitioned a lot of children onto higher education and maybe like a trade school or, different sort of avenues. And one of the things that I saw was there was a need for these accommodations to continue as they move forward. And I just didn't always see that availability. And so what happened was these kids who were very capable weren't accessing the curriculums, and that was something where I thought, okay, that's my next step, that's what I'm going to go do. So retired from the public school system, took a job at Temple, and the job at Temple was a little different. I worked more with in-service teachers, so these were career and technical teachers, and so I was working with them, trying to have them learn about learning disabilities. If that sounds, I might be very wordy, but I'm sort of working with them because they did not have prior experience working with special needs students, and trying to give them teaching support and like just education about this is what a student with a disability will look like in your class. And when you see behavior like this is what it really means. Like, stop just assuming it's a bad kid. Let's start looking at underneath what is really happening and how can we make this better. And so then from there came to LaSalle, and LaSalle was just so much more. This opportunity was really, really in line with what I wanted to do, because it really is, my job is to ensure that kids who are provided accommodations, that they're really being offered, that the kids are taking advantage, that it's helpful for them. So to me, it was just like this natural progression. And I feel like I'm back home again, because this is really the working with students with disabilities. And I just love that. That's just been my life for years and years and years.
Yeah. That's an amazing journey. And so I currently work, well, welcome to the center, because I've worked at the center now for 6 years, and I just could sing its praises forever. So obviously I'm still here. I'm post 2 years out of graduation, and I meet with Phoenix every week. She's an awesome boss, so you're just gonna love it here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very much appreciate her.
Yeah, she's just excellent. And as I was I started as a tutor, a little bit about me, and then I turned into a supplemental instruction leader, and I currently am a professional STEM tutor, and all subjects are difficult, but I found STEM is the one place where students really, really struggle. And so now I knew that there was, the Office of Accessibility and like accommodations. And I would sometimes say, oh, maybe you should go talk to them. Now as a TA, that is like the first thing I do, because students always come to me and they're like, I just can't study. I don't feel like things are working. And I'm like, I can tell you what works for me. And it might work perfectly for you. However, I think today we're realizing everyone's brains are so different and how they
Yep.
behave and how we even just process things. Like when I'm teaching, I'll say, for me, a table works. I need to look at a table and it needs to be organized. If it's
Mhm.
unorganized, I can't memorize it.
Right.
Dissections don't work for me, but I have students who need to dissect something and feel it.
Yes.
And so it's
Yeah.
the same way I think with learning any kind of content. And I always encourage, especially students, to get extra time, because that seems to be one of the major things, at least that I've interacted with the accommodations office at both universities that I've worked
Yes.
at. Because
Yeah.
one thing you hear all the time is, I don't have enough time. And I'm like, I know someone who can give you more time. So I
Yeah.
really appreciate the office. I think it's becoming more, it's always been available. I think it's becoming more utilized, at least I hope it is. I'm trying to
Yeah.
push it.
I think
Yeah.
it's accepted a little bit more. I
Mhm.
think what was a struggle was for so many years it was considered an embarrassment if you needed the extra help. And there was such stigma attached to it,
Mhm.
like either they were going to use these accommodations as a crutch. So maybe they're lazy, maybe they're not really giving it all their energy, or two, maybe they're just not smart enough, and so even though those words might not have come out of somebody's mouth, I think there was a feeling, there's definitely
Yeah.
a sense
Mhm.
from certain people that that's maybe what they implied when they were in class. And so kids absorb this, and
Mhm.
that's what they start to think. And then it's like a bad thing to ask for help. It's a bad thing to self-advocate and look for flexibility in teaching. And the truth is, and this is the piece that I tell my own children, everybody's brain works differently. Just because we have this generalized way of teaching, because we have to
Mhm.
reach such a large and broad group of students, we tend to teach in a box. We tend to just use the same things that work, and the truth is it only really meets just maybe half of us. The other
Mhm.
half make accommodations for ourselves. A lot of times we can adjust and we can do things that we know, well, that didn't work for me, but I can do this. That'll help me to learn. Like you said, you figured out what works best for you. People can do that. And then there are some students that are like, I don't care what, I've tried a number of ways, it does not work. And
Mhm.
so then we have to really go back and say, well, why is this not working? And obviously you get some information, you can do some testing, you can do some things, but you find out how their brain works a little bit better, where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are. And you start to say, okay, so we know we have to improve these weaknesses, and we've got to use your strengths to improve those weaknesses. And it's a lot of confidence building too, because these are now kids who have, especially college students, years and years of maybe really struggling in school. Maybe they didn't get as much support or the direct type of support or targeted support they needed. And they come to college with, like, I think I can do this. They hit their first class and go, I don't think I can do this,
Mhm.
because there's oftentimes a very similar pattern to how things are being taught, and it's not always as flexible or as accommodating to people who have different needs. And so I think the trend now is we're starting to recognize this and we're moving down that path, which just great, it's great joy for me, because it's like, yes, that's what we need to do. Everybody's worth worthy of a good education. And we can provide that if we just kind of look at it differently and say, oh, this didn't work for you. All right, I have another idea. Let's try it this way. Because and then eventually the student sort of learning, this is what works for me, self-advocating and becoming more independent and asking for what they need. So long story short, yeah, that's
No, I completely agree, especially about the stigma. And it's funny because, especially you said maybe half the students in the room that works for them. The literature shows that a lot of the current teaching style does not work for anybody. It is
yeah.
not the best method. Inner we A lot of professors, because it was the style, is very lecture heavy, and
Yeah.
literature and studies are really showing that interaction,
Hmm.
activities, things that feel maybe elementary are actually still the way we learn.
Yep.
So I'm very invested in specifically enhancing STEM education. So I have read the
Yes.
literature, but yeah,
Yes.
I agree. I think the stigma's going away and people are realizing, like, hey, I don't learn this way. Let's
Right.
find out the best way I learn, because that's the only way you'll learn. You can't, everyone, like you said, there's this box. And I think
Mhm.
I think uniqueness has been really appreciated in the last
Yes.
few years. So I hope
Yeah,
that trend continues.
I do too. You know
Uh,
what, it breaks my heart because I have two children who have learning disabilities. The oldest is in college now, and she was of the mindset, she was extremely sensitive to how she appeared in classrooms, and always felt like the minute I ask for help, everybody thinks I'm stupid. And so did not take advantage necessarily, and
mm,
she didn't have the mindset or the confidence really to do what she needed to do. And then contrast to that, I have my youngest daughter has a more significant learning disability, but embraced it and said, that's okay. I have a disability. You want to make fun of me? I don't care. I have a disability. I'm going to ask for the help I need, and I'm going to get what I can out of this class. And that attitude, that mindset, also the confidence, it is okay. It's okay to be different. It's okay to learn differently. It's okay to ask for
mm.
help, that in the end, it helps you. And I'm so glad that eventually I got my message across correctly. And my first one, I think I made some mistakes. By the time my third one came, it was like, yes, this is what I want people to know, and
Well, as the
not
oldest
just
child, I'll say that's typical. The first one gets you're the guinea
we,
pig,
we
and
make
then
all our mistakes with you.
exactly. I'm the oldest of four, so I totally understand
Oh,
that.
geez. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh.
and clearly this has played a role in your life since
Hmm.
children, but even before that. Can you tell me more about your specific role here and what type of role and impact you hope to have on the LaSalle community?
Sure. So my role here is typically, if students are interested or feel that they may need some accommodations, they can come see me. I work very closely with Rose Lee Pauline, and she is the Title IX coordinator. She's the compliance officer. So while we work closely together, we have very different jobs. Her job is to really look at the documentation and make sure that it complies with all the regulations so that she can allow for accommodations. Excuse me, and then I take it from there. And at that point, then those students come onto my caseload, and I meet with them periodically throughout the semester, particularly the beginning, the middle, and the end, but hopefully multiple times in between. And my job is really to make sure, are these accommodations working for you? Because here's the thing, on paper, a document can tell you that you have this particular disability. What that really looks like for you may be different, and it may be different in different settings, a lab versus a lecture, the types of supports that you might need. So my checking in with them is really to say, look at your classes this semester. I know that you have this particular accommodation. You're allowed to have copies of notes. Is that even working in this particular setting? Because this particular setting doesn't necessarily lend itself to this. So then we talk about, okay, if it's not, how can we work with your professor? Because it's just professors and instructors, they're all human. We all make mistakes. They can't be 100% perfect and remember exactly what you need, but you
Mm,
know what you need. So then it becomes me sort of teasing out from them, like, what works best for you? In what way could we make this easier for you so that you could learn it? And then it's, okay, now let's share this with the professor, the instructor, whomever you're working with. And it's helping them to devise an email, helping them to sit down and have a face. I mean, my ultimate is for them to have a face-to-face conversation with their instructors. I think that's kind of intimidating for a lot of incoming students, for sure. But ultimately, that's what I want, is for them to be able to sit and explain, this doesn't quite work. And I know that by the letter of the law, this is the accommodation I'm supposed to get. But could we work in the spirit of the law, in the meaning that, could we have some flexibility, knowing that each particular class is going to look differently, is going to have different needs? So that's, and then in the end, I think that it's really about me working with them to become accepting of their disability and embracing it, and then self-advocating and really knowing that it's okay to ask for flexibility, that actually when they ask for help, that probably there are 90% of the kids in the class or students in the class are thinking the same thing, that they're not wildly off in what they're asking for support. So that I'm not sure, I start talking so much I forget if I answered the question or not.
you did, and you
Okay.
really emphasized the student center approach, which I think again
Yes.
is really has increased in more recent times. Because I think before every college's billboard today says you're not just a number. Whereas before that was totally the case. I remember my grandmom said when you had test results, they posted like your social security number
Yes.
and the
Yes.
test. Like
Hmm.
you were a
That's what they
number.
did in grad school. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
which is
It's just
crazy
horrifying. Yeah.
because now it's like don't give that number to anybody. But it's funny, like the student center approach is taking on, and I think it's really beneficial. And that being said, what type of student do you think can benefit from meeting with you?
So the students I'm thinking of, and truly, I mean, these are students who may or may not have had accommodations in high school and they're transitioning to college. These may be students who are in a community college who realize, maybe they have accommodations in the community college and they're transitioning to a 4-year and recognize they'll need it there. But it's also for any students who recognize that they had a pattern of struggles
Mm,
or a pattern of just certain subjects that were really challenging for them, and they get to college and now it's even more apparent that this is an issue. These are kids that should come see me because when we, or students, I keep saying kids, sorry, I'm
mhm.
thinking of my own children. These are students that should come see me because what we do is we kind of take some time in like we do like a history. My background is actually social work, so I'm really good about getting into like sort of the background and getting history from people, and in doing so I can kind of find the patterns in all of this. And okay, would it help if we did this, if we did that? I can refer them to get actual formal testing if they don't already have. We get that to Rosalie Pauline, hopefully get some accommodations. And with accommodations, then I work with them again on like, how is this going to work for you? How is this going to look in each class? How do you handle when it doesn't work? Like, what are we going to do? But it's also, for some of those kids, when they don't get the accommodations, but still recognize that they really are struggling, I can still work with them. Just to, and again, I can refer to other campus resources. I mean, we have this, the Center for Academic Achievement is a strong and wonderful tutoring service. So I
Mhm.
certainly, I'm not alone in this. I may say to them, okay, so you don't have accommodations, but I see that you really have a lot of need for executive functioning and organizational skills. I've got Melissa next door, edit, and
Right.
so okay, let's go and go ahead and schedule an appointment with her, or maybe we need to go to counseling, maybe we need to do. So it's also referring to campus resources as needed. But it, I truly think there are a lot of kids who suffer in silence, if I can say that. They
Mhm.
sit in a class and they struggle and they just think, well, this is what it's been for years and years, and don't necessarily see that there's a place to go or that there's an option to make it better. They just stay kind of quiet. And when they start to realize, no, there's help for you, and or even if there isn't a formal plan, you are still capable of going up and asking, do you mind? I'm really struggling with this. Could we do this? Could we add this,
Mhm.
into the curriculum, or could I have this done in a certain way just because it makes such sense for me? And most professors I find are pretty open to the idea. I think, it's been lovely, to hear how accepting and wonderful they've been with, accommodations and requests like that. So,
Awesome. And yeah, that's
yeah.
I strongly feel that the point of this interview and the audience I'm hoping to reach are those students who recognize that they need help, but maybe feel like, oh, well, I haven't gotten it so far, or I don't want to look stupid. I hope that this video can reach them. And one, they can
Yes.
realize you don't have to pay for it. That's actually my favorite thing to tell students is you already pay for it. Anytime they
Yeah.
wonder about tutoring, I had one student ask me how much they owed me at the end of a session, and I was like,
Oh gosh, that's so, oh,
teachers should be, I feel like, really, you already pay for these
yeah.
services for the center to run. I'm pretty cheap. I do not want to pay for something and not use it. So I like to
Right. Right.
emphasize that. But it's those students that I hope we can reach. And what is something you would say to a student who is feeling that way, feeling like I'm identifying that I need help, but I'm really hesitant. I don't want to go to the center. What would you, or I don't want to request academic accommodations. What's something you'd say to them?
So I would actually have them come in, and I would say, come see me. That's what I would say. And the
Yeah.
reason being because I think when you can have an honest conversation and you can get them to start thinking about how it feels, when do you feel this way? What has happened? What is the task that you're expected to do that gives you anxiety? When do you, is, like you said, testing is a huge one. Is timing, when there's a time limit, is that what creates anxiety? Well, when you have anxiety, you're not performing or learning in any way that's efficient. You're just not. It's a fact. You can't live in both worlds there. So let's talk about that. And kind of figuring out what we can do. And so I think the biggest thing that kids miss too is they don't want to communicate. And so if they don't want to come to me, they need to communicate with the instructor or the professor. And they really absolutely have to be, I think, much better about reaching out to share with the professor, I'm struggling with this. And that's my greatest problem that I'm running into with college age students, is that they're not real good with reaching out to communicate with the instructors. And I'm finding that when they do, they have such good success. So to me, it's like, okay, that should reinforce that that's a good behavior. We want to keep doing that. But a lot of times they still get so nervous every time they have to reach out to another professor. And I feel like the communication piece is number one. If you take me out of the picture, if you don't even know I exist, the greatest piece of advice is reach out to the professor, talk to them one-on-one, whether it be through an email or in person, but to let them know where you are, what you're struggling with, because they can work with you. And I think sometimes that emboldens kids and gives them a little bit of encouragement and confidence. And then they can start saying, like, look, I'm doing this in every class. Perhaps I need to look a little bigger picture at, do I need accommodations in general? And like, there's some that don't recognize that they have a learning disability. And then there are some that don't want to self-identify, like we already mentioned, for lots and lots of reasons. And there's hidden disabilities, and these are, mental health. A lot of kids, again, still struggling with it, not necessarily wanting people to know, and that's absolutely fine for confidentiality. But I think for success reasons, if you really want to learn, you have to be comfortable with being a little uncomfortable. So, having to reach out and speak to a professor or an instructor independently, you're going to have to work through that, because that's the only way that you benefit in the end. That's how you learn. So
Right. And my last question was just one piece of advice for incoming first-year students, but I think we really hit on the whole communication point. No, it's perfect, because I agree. And you had mentioned briefly earlier about helping students write emails. As a tutor, as an SI, I found myself as a mentor now in graduate school. I find myself helping students send messages, send emails, because there is this fear they're going to word something wrong.
Yes.
So I think you're right. I think communication is such a big key, and your professor, it's not like high school, it's not like grade school where they know how you're doing. They can't keep track of everyone. They don't know you're a hard worker. You need to tell them. So I agree.
Right.
Yeah, I really agree with that tip.
And it's so hard. I think, COVID didn't help us in any way, shape, or form. So I get that. Even my own kids, I can see some regression in some of their behavior. But I think it is a general, like, across the board. I haven't in the last 2 years. I just feel like that's the thing I'm struggling most with are students who are now so reticent. They're even more reticent to reach out. And so hoping to get past that, I'm hoping to really, I think people need to know they have a place on this earth and they're very worthy of the education. And that's the point I want to get across to them, even if I don't fix all their problems. I want them to know.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I personally feel like this interview went so well. You're obviously so friendly and you're obviously so passionate about this. And I really hope this reaches the target audience and that students really start to take advantage of this service. And again, welcome to the center. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you, Tess. I appreciate that. That was lovely.